Hey everybody, welcome to the Dad Challenge Podcast on the road with me in the Tesla. I have to work today, like every day. If you didn't know, I am not a YouTuber by trade. It's a side hustle for me and I love doing it. And it's being exciting and it's cool. Today, it's Tuesday. It's supposed to be Tinfoil Hat Tuesdays. It's the day that we usually run down a conspiracy theory or something like that, go down the rabbit hole and present you the evidence on both sides, and then you can choose for yourself. We don't have anything yet. There's going to be some research that goes into it, but yesterday's video caused a bit of a stir. I mean, it caused a lot of people to think it's kind of what I love to do. Not saying that I'm always right about this type of stuff, but I'm always learning. I hope that it came across to you that I'm not a biblical scholar. So everything that I tell you comes from my own opinion about my own study, and I want to make sure that you continue to do that yourself, okay? Because I'm not saying that everything that I say is right or biblical truth, because it might not be. And I want to make sure that you are checking yourself and not just trusting what even your pastor, who you might love and trust, says. This is the beautiful thing about our faith, guys, is that, or even if you don't have the faith, is that it's so accessible for you to go learn yourself. You do not need a teacher to tell you. You can actually do it yourself. It's really, really, really convenient. So if you have questions, there's tons of articles online. There's a Bible that you can read yourself, and all that stuff. But I just wanted to address some comments that people made, good and bad, and not bad necessarily, but like good questions about like, well, what about this? Or you're wrong about this, and that's fine. I'm happy to be corrected. If you can correct me biblically without a shadow of a doubt about my theology, if it's wrong or not, then I'm happy to learn from it. Okay, I'm not a cocky bugger. So without further ado, when I get to a good spot here on the highway, I'm going to open up the comments that I've screenshotted. I'm going to read them out and I answer or, support or answer your question or whatever. I'll react to your comments. So let me open up the first one here. So here's a comment I got from Chris Hershey. And this guy clearly goes to church. And that's good. He probably knows a little bit of theology. He probably understands it, does his own research, or has gone to school, or is in ministry. I don't know. It's unclear, and that's fine. What Chris says is that I do think it's important to point out that there are smaller churches who would love younger members. They need the support. And if you don't like how they spend the money, it's easier to get involved with leadership, usually. He's right. This is a really good point. Meaning that all these smaller churches, especially in my region, are hurting for talented people, especially for worship teams and stuff like that, and servants. Young people tend to gravitate towards the flashier church, the one that they can dress the way they want, they don't feel judged. The Hillsongs, the Bethels, the Elevation style churches, because they're the hot, fresh ones. They're also the place where all the young people go. So if you're in this world, cultural church of world, and you are single, it is a great place for you to go. Unfortunately, churches like even mine wasn't a great place for young people. It was really still driven towards the family. There are a ton of churches out there, but unfortunately, those churches are the ones, not unfortunately, fortunately, there are churches out there that attract these younger people. But if you're a young person who has a strong, steadfast faith or wants to research more and doesn't want to be tied up in something so shallow, and it's more important for you to understand your faith than it is to go meet someone single or be a part of the cool crowd that drinks Starbucks and wears those stupid hats, then it is important for you to go get plugged into a gospel-centered church, because these Hillsong, Elevation, Bethel style churches are not gospel central churches, okay? They are literally TED Talks on a Sunday with amazing music. And I say that because their music is amazing. Like, as a worship pastor myself, Elevation, Bethel, Hillsong, all their artists are incredibly gifted. World-class musicians playing incredible music, writing music for the church, making a lot of money. That's another video. And their culture is amazing. And their culture is literally targeted towards young people, millennials, and people to get them in their doors. Which is, it is what it is. They don't make a lot of money because people don't tend to tithe, which is what we're talking about. But anyway, yes, he's right. If you do feel called to go serve or do something as a young person, go do it at a small church. I promise you, it's a better place for you to be. You will not get burnt out as badly, maybe. You will find culture and community way faster in a small church too. So he goes on to say, one point Josh misses is that giving to church is about trusting the judgment of the leadership. If you trust leadership, then you should not give your money elsewhere. I think, he puts in brackets. If you're committed to a church, trust that the leaders are following God's lead and how the money is used. He's right here. He's saying that wherever you give your money, you should trust that the leadership of that place is doing good things with the money. The church doesn't have to be, and again, that's what my video is about. The church doesn't have to be the place that takes your money, okay? Or that gets your money. The church can be a place that gets your money, but also other things can be a place that gets your money. Or you could be the steward of your money yourself and do the things you want to do with it, like donate to food banks, or buy food for homeless people, or feed a single mom, or take care of a single mom's kids so she can go to work, or help in those areas, right? These are things you can do. He's saying that the church, you can give money to the church, just make sure that they're accountable before they spend. And he's right. But my point is that, yeah, you can give to church, or you can give elsewhere too. So that's what I'm talking about. We're kind of on the same page, but I think he's alluding to the next sentence here, where he says, if you feel you need to give your money elsewhere, then you probably have a bigger problem. My guess is that Josh would agree with this. His issues are really mega churches, and really people just need to stop going to them. No, you're wrong, dude. You're saying that there's an issue if you don't want to give your money to a church. That's bullshit, okay? There's no bigger issue there. Like, imagine having that kind of statement where you say, well, if you don't give to the church, you're doing it wrong. Basically, what he's saying here is that you don't give your money and you're tied to the church, you're doing it wrong. My question stands. If you feed a homeless woman, give her a new coat and a new pair of shoes, and in your heart you're doing that in Jesus' name, are you telling me that that's not as good as giving your money to the church in the offering plate, where over 60% of that is going to go to salaries alone, and then the other 40% is going to be spent on we don't know what, and 20% is going to be waste? I'm sorry. No, you're wrong, dude. Giving your money you do not need to tie to a church anymore. You can. I'm not saying don't. I'm just saying you don't have to. It's not like pastors and churches are telling you have to do it anymore. It is not something you have to do anymore. Okay, so you're wrong. So saying that to people, that's what churches are doing. That's where churches are guilting people into giving money. There's a church that someone wrote that said Open Doors, I think it's called. And apparently they make you sign a thing that says you're going to tithe before you come here. Like, if you're going to be a member, you have to tithe or whatever. And I reached out to them for comment. I'm waiting to hear back. But that's just bullshit, okay? Saying that, guilting someone into saying, well, if you don't give your money to the church, then you got bigger problems. That's absolute and utter bullshit. So make sure you just check yourself before you wreck yourself on that one, bro. Because that is not true. And I do not agree with you. And I would not agree with you. I'm also not saying don't go to mega churches. I'm just saying check where you go and be cognizant of what you're learning and learn your own stuff. There are amazing mega churches out there who do really cool things. Life Church TV with Greg Rochelle's church. I do like North Point. Love Andy Stanley's teachings. There are some great stuff going on out there. I'm just saying. They spend a lot of money. They waste a lot of money. And they tend to take away, again, they're the cruise ship church that tends to sink the tugboat who's coming along with the gospel. Not to say that there's wrong what they're doing. Just saying that you gotta figure it out properly for your faith. So, sorry, that's a rant. Next one I got was from Lisa Pena. My husband and I would slip money into our youth pastor's music ministry in private to buy their books or equipment they wanted to go towards the youth. And here's a problem with this statement, is that you had to do that. Because churches will often like defund or not pour enough resources into the ministries that they don't deem necessary. Like my church where I got fired, the music is secondary. Even though that was the reason some of the people were starting to come, it's part of the reason I think I got fired, was the music was becoming primary. The Sunday morning experience was the reason people were coming. And the pastor didn't like that. So what they'll do is they'll often like shut you down through red tape and like not letting you purchase the things you need to purchase to make that better. And if you need to pour money into your youth pastor or your worship minister's pastor's pocket to help him with ministry, your church is doing it wrong. And that's nice of you to do that. But the more important thing you need to do is have a meeting with your pastor or bring it up at these monthly or these quarterly meetings and talk about it. That's nice of you to do, but that doesn't solve anybody's problem. And you know, I love that you do that, but again, if you're not bringing it up to the pastor and talking to them about why, I understand some people think that pastors are holy and that they're protected and you shouldn't come up against them, you shouldn't come against their authority. It's bullshit. Sorry. Pastors are human and they are not infallible and they are not perfect. A lot of them are way imperfect. Most of them are, like me, way imperfect, who think like I'm thinking now but are afraid to talk about it. So yeah, it's great that you're helping, But the bigger problem is maybe you need to gather with a bunch of people who are like-minded like you and approach the leadership and say, why isn't he getting the things he needs, or she getting the things she needs? What is happening here? Why do I need to put money in his pocket in secret? That's the conversation. But that's great for you to do that. I love it. Next comment is from Lindsay Stein. I really think churches who make a certain amount of tithing donations should be taxed. There should be no Joel Osteen's, or however you spell his name. Hundo percent correcto on this one. One of the things I think is important for churches, especially small churches, is that they stay tax exempt. Small churches who need the support should get the support they need. Because small churches, again, will tend to do it right. They tend to not be afraid of the gospel. They tend to be the ones that aren't attended as much because they are unafraid of talking about what the real gospel is. And some people don't like to be called out because the gospel is hard to listen to if you want to live your own life sometimes. Like Jesus at one point tells the guy, I told you about this, the guy's like, what do I need to do to be holy or to follow you or whatever? Jesus is like, you know what? You're rich, you're wealthy. Imagine I told you guys this, or even myself, or these rich people at churches. You sell everything you own, your house, your cars, your possessions. You sell everything you own, okay? And then you give that to the poor, and then you can come follow me. How many would do it? This many would do it. This many. So gospel is a really hard thing to understand and follow. And so people who want to just live the TED Talk lifestyle, the cruise ship church lifestyle, they're not going to those churches. So those churches need to be exempt from that. And big churches, I think you're right. There needs to be a tier. If a church like North Point or Hillsong and Bethel with tens of millions of dollars annual budget, you can pay tax. And you can still give to the community. So a lot of these churches will say, well, if you start taxing us, then, 30% of our tithe has got to go to tax. Okay. Still making more than exorbitant amounts of millions and millions and millions of dollars. You can still do the things you need to do. So many people do good things for Jesus on such smaller budgets. So you'll be fine. So I think you're right. I think larger churches need to pay their fair share of tax, especially for the amount of buildings and shit that they own. Like they own property on property on property. Some of them own acres, hundreds of acres, in some of the primest real estate in some of the cities that they're in. And they just get tax exempt. So you're right. Churches who are larger at some tier, some level, need to start paying taxes. I agree. Michelle Amaya says, it's so sad, but most of them are this way. When I had to schedule an appointment with my pastor when I was dealing with severe anxiety and thoughts, that's when I left. It became more of a business than a helping hand. Jesus like church. Jesus like church. So what she's saying here is that modern churches, specifically busy churches, you can't just go meet your pastor, right? And I talked about this in the video where smaller church pastors do more work because they are more accessible, right? You can call them, you can go to their house, they'll come to your house, you'll have a coffee, they're there for you 24 hours a day. A pastor's job is to be there 24 hours a day for his congregants, okay? I met Andy Stanley really quick once because he has literally an entourage of security and police around him at all times. You can't just go meet with Andy Stanley, okay? I'm using Andy Stanley because that's the only one I know of. When you have to schedule an appointment to meet a pastor for an issue, I can see why, but you have to also understand it's a new world. Everybody's really busy. I do get that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but again, larger churches, you're going to fall into this realm of you're not going to have an accessible pastor because he's a celebrity and he needs to work on his sermons for Sunday, and he has other pastors to do that for him, right? That's why so many churches have 100 pastors of some obscure titles, like pastor of flowers. They bring flowers to people for funerals. Pastor of this, pastor of that. If a main pastor is too busy to meet with his congregants, he's kind of doing it wrong. These other pastors are so busy because they're writing books, they're doing tours, they're speaking on Sunday and then they leave. They're not accessible. That's not necessarily the worst thing in the world because they're busy, but if that's not for you, just don't go to those churches, I guess, is my answer. But you're right. I do see where you're coming from. Wookiee Lover 123 Dowdy says, it's very like a pay for play type of thing. This was enlightening. Yes. I talked about this too, especially with the elders who give lots of money, right? People who tithe a lot tend to have this feeling that they should be heard more, that their voice is more important, that because they tithe, that they have more skin in the game and therefore should have more say in how church is run. There's a book called The Devil in Pew Number 7. Very, very, very crazy story. I'm trying to get Rebecca Alonso on the podcast. She's so good. Her story is incredible, but so scary. And this type of person that goes to a church that tithes who wants to have more say. But you're right. In every church, not every, but okay, I say every, but the majority of churches will pander to their tithers. I grew up in a church like that. They will pander to the tithers because those tithers are what keep the lights on. Those tithers are what pay the pastor. Without tithers, and again, remember what I said, 90% of the money that comes into a church is from 10% of the congregation. So, can you blame them? I mean, sort of, because as a church, part of the whole thing is faith and understanding that God will take care of you. And if you're worried about a tither over God and what he needs you to be doing, you're doing it wrong. So, good point. Amy says, money-hungry, entitled churches are the reasons I don't go to church anymore. My old church turned me away many times, looked down on my family because we were financially struggling, and didn't want us to help out any of their ministries, so we stopped going. I find that agnostic pagans and other unconventional religions show more love and acceptance in most churches. And isn't that the truth? Isn't that the scariest truth you've ever seen? So, the church itself, I've seen that, and I've been told that from my top-down leadership that there's someone who's problematic on my team, they need to go, right? In some levels, there's craziness. I remember a story of my team, and I liked both of these people. They were married, both served on the worship team. The one husband left his wife because he was gay. And we could talk about that all day long, but that's not the issue here. The issue here is that they were both asked to leave, step down, and she was even held at a higher level, more accountable than he was. And they were, to be honest with you, he's just trying to live his truth too, right? And he was asked to leave, but he still loved Jesus, and he still wanted to serve Jesus and sing music and all this stuff. But they were both asked to leave, and they never came back ever again. The other one still is so angry about how they treated her about the situation because she felt wronged, as she should. Basically, he cheated on her and left her. I don't know if he cheated on her, but basically left her for another man, and that's a marriage that's broken with kids. And so she went to the church for support, and they didn't give her the support she wanted. They basically told her to step down and get counseling instead of, and go get counseling. But isn't that what the church is for? So yeah, you're right. The church is just this place of like absolute judgment all the time. There are people who do get love. Those people tithe. But people who hurt the most, who go to church, are the ones who literally get the least help. I found that myself in lots of churches. It really is the truth. And it really is sad. Because people just feel like they're there for charity. Okay, whatever. If you think that Jesus would help them, then help them. And I think Jesus would. The end. And I forget, Elizabeth says, a church I visited only once will not allow anyone to join the church unless they sign a promissory note to tithe. And she said it was Open Door in Erie County, which I'm not sure if that's in Pennsylvania or not. I reached out to Open Door, I asked them that. Basically what it says is that you can go to the church, you just cannot become a member unless you sign this, not just a promissory note for tithing, but like at my ex-church, you had to, if you want to become a member, you literally now you were signing a letter that says I can be held accountable by this church. So if I do something in sin or whatever the case may be, that's outside of the church's rules or regulations, you can hold me to account. You can basically chastise me and you can kick me out if you want. You sign that letter saying that you can do that. So a lot of people sign that and then they get all like up in arms when they get called out for their bad behavior. But you signed it. So this church says you can't be a member unless you're tithing. So that's bullshit. I get what they're trying to say. Like if you want to be here, tithing is an important part of your life. Giving is yes. Volunteering is yes. But you shouldn't force anybody to give money to your church. That's stupid. But yeah, that's dumb. There's no other explanation for this. Is that they're just saying, look, if you want to be a member, the only way you can be a member here is if you're tithing to us because we want your money, and then you can be a member because you got skin in the game. I get it, but it's dumb. And churches shouldn't be doing that. And that's why people don't go to those churches. They find out that's what it takes to be a membership, and they lose more people than they gain because it's greedy. It's literally greed. It's, we need your money. We need your promise you're going to give it to us. And what happens if you become a member and you stop tithing? Are they going to kick you out? Come on. Be real. Stop worrying about the money, guys. If you're a true faith-based church and you're a true believer in Jesus, God's going to take care of you. I can't tell you how many times God took care of me when I was down and out. And I grew up very poor. I was homeless for a period of my life. God took care of me always. I've always been taken care of. I've always had faith for Him. And I'm also generous, if I can be at all times. And so these churches who do this really show a lack of faith for God in their ministry. They're saying, well, I don't trust God. I have to make sure to force people to pay us. Scary. Not So Perfectly Me says, we always put cash in without our names attached, meaning the offering plate, right? I feel weird about using my tithe as a tax write-off. Don't. I wouldn't. I mean, it's a benefit that you get. Again, God said, test me in this. It's one of the benefits of tithing, so use it. I don't think there's, like, tithing and telling people about it is different than tithing and getting a tax return. If you're going to tithe, just keep your mouth shut. If you're going to give to somebody, keep your mouth shut. You don't have to tell everybody that you give or charitable. That's defeats the point. But if you do it in God's name and it's in your heart, you'll be blessed because of it. You know, giving feels good. We talked about that. Giving feels great. But you don't have to shout it from the rooftops. But if you get an advantage to giving, give it. Whatever. If that's an advantage they're going to give you, the whole world is saying, thank you for giving. Here's an advantage we're going to give you. Take it. There's nothing wrong with that. One day I was in a group with the pastor talking about tithing. And I said what I stated above. Pastor, the loose cash in the plates don't equal anyone's 10%, is what he said. So he basically said, yeah, that's nice, but that's not 10%, so you're wrong. Or it's not helping. Could you imagine a pastor says that to you, say, hey, I just put loose cash in so I don't get a tax return. He's like, well, that's not 10%. Like, you, buddy. I would be like, you're an asshole, dude. Did you just say that to my face? And so I was about to spit fire, she says. We may not have always managed 10%, but we have what we could. And at the time, I was unemployed and my husband wasn't making much. To say loose cash wasn't anyone's 10% pissed me off beyond measure. Guess what? The $30 we gave was in fact our full 10%, and it hurt to give it. And so this pastor just spouts off this bullshit, not knowing. Like, remember, we didn't talk about this, but there's I'm sure it's in Matthew, I don't know, Corinthians. The woman who gives her last, like, penny or 2 pennies. And the guy scoffs at her. He says, what is this? This is nothing. This is a pittance. Jesus steps up and says, are you kidding me? She literally gave more than you because she gave everything she had. Just because you're rich and you give more doesn't mean you give more. Those who give less because they have less give more. Does that make sense? So if you're giving, it hurts because you only give $30 and that's all you have because that's the rest of it. You gave more than the rich man gave, even if he gave $1 million, if he has $30 million. You gave more. Jesus sees that. So just be encouraged. Giving is giving. And so this pastor is a complete and utter asshole. So I feel like I was slapped in the face and punched in the gut, she says. We left shortly after and really haven't been in any church in over 5 years. I came to the harsh realization that broke poor people just aren't welcome. It's okay though. I've grown in my faith more the past few years than I ever did in church. Right? She says, poor people aren't really welcome. Now look, poor people are welcome in churches. Most churches will say, come as you are. We want everybody in the pews. Poor people just don't get treated the same. And this is indicative of the world that we live in. The church treats people, and not all churches, and not all pastors do that. Some churches do a lot of great things for poor people. But there are too many stories to ignore the fact that it's true. The fact that it actually is true. That people who need more help get treated differently in the church. And I've seen it firsthand hundreds of times. Hundreds of times, okay? My own personal eyeballs have seen it. Not just stories I've heard. I've seen it. I've left many churches because of that. And so churches don't want to set precedences because then they are expected to do those things. And that's so dumb. So, and she says she's grown in her faith more now that she's doing on her own. And that's, look at that, guys. It's another story of people who, like, some people are surprised that my story doesn't include me losing my faith. Because it's not the church's responsibility to foster your faith. That's your responsibility. How you worship, how you faith, how you do everything with God, that's on you. You cannot blame a church for your lack of faith or ability in Jesus. Sorry. A church can be blamed, though, for certain things leading to that decision, but not ultimately all of it. Some people are abused. Some people are hated and gossiped about, and even from leaders. And so, yeah, there is a responsibility for church to hold on to that stuff, but it's still on you in the end. Your salvation is way more important than some douchebag in a church talking about you or calling you out or treating you badly. I'm really serious about that. It's way bigger than that. And so that's your responsibility. It's a hard truth. Walking with Paul. This guy wants to get into a theological debate about tithing, which is fine. Because again, I'm not a theological scholar. You were 100% right about tithing, but 100% wrong about Old Testament or Torah, commandments of God. So why did Jesus stress the importance of generous giving because God said to in the Torah. He's right. Virtually everything taught by Jesus, Paul, Peter, James, John was Torah or Old Testament foundation. Many commandments simply can't be done in today's present age because there's no temple, no Levitical priesthood, etc. He's right. Jesus never came to change the Torah, but to live it out to its full extent. Please sincerely explore an alternative prospect to the idea of Old Testament has been nailed to the cross. So what he's saying here is that Jesus came and they taught based on the teachings that they knew at the time of the Torah, which is the Old Testament. He's right. But it can't be ignored that some of the old Torah law, the Mosaic law that they lived by up until Jesus' death, was law. Okay, so the tithing thing will still stand here. You do not have to give to the storehouses any longer. But the Torah stressed the idea of giving as a form of sacrifice. Sorry, right? And so Jesus carries that over with the intention, though, of saying, look, but it doesn't have to be that way it was. But it still has to be generous. It still has to be sacrificial. It still has to hurt a little bit. And again, you do this. Being generous is important. But it's still, my point still stands. We don't live by Mosaic Torah law anymore. The Leviticus law does not stand anymore. Some of the stories and some of the lessons we learn from it can be pulled from it, no problem. But we do not have to do those things anymore. And so churches leaning on Leviticus and Mosaic law for these types of things are doing it wrong. But some churches actually do believe that the Old Testament has not been passed over by Jesus' death. And some of these churches are evangelical Christian churches who believe this, which is mind-blowing to me. They'll use that and they'll pick and choose. Leviticus law is about as anti-gay as they get. Leviticus law is anti-women as they get. We can debate about that. I'm pretty sure I'm right about it. And I mean, the Bible is not, a lot of people will say the Bible is not gray at all. It's all black and white. It's all there. Red letters, black, white, and red. And that whatever it says, you do. But you can never live by those standards from the Old Testament law. It's just impossible. So to say that is bullshit. Sorry. Cecilia Ramos writes, if all churches were to preach the true gospel, 99% of them would be small and broke. People don't want to hear about sin and repentance. They want to hear about health and wealth. Most people and pastors in church aren't saved. I don't know about that last part, but she's right about the first part. If people spoke the true gospel the way it was meant to be presented, people would go. And they don't. They want to be presented with a life lesson, maybe tied to the Bible, if at all, about how you do you, and you're amazing and awesome, and here's how to parent properly, and here's how to do this, and 5 ways to, I don't know, it's bullshit. But TED Talks is basically the only way I can say it. It's a feel-good talk. You come on a Sunday, you feel good when you leave, when the actual truth of the gospel is that sometimes, you can feel good about the gospel, about the hope in the gospel, because there's lots of good hope in there. But you're not always going to feel uplifted and with the gospel. You're going to sometimes feel like I'm falling short, I've shit the bed, and I'm messing up. The gospel is there to correct you. The gospel is there for a benchmark for holiness. Okay? And if you're falling short of it, that's the reminder for you. And some people don't want to be reminded of their sin, or don't even want to be told that they're sinning at all. Be like, that's not me, I don't sin. No, you can't tell me I'm a sinner, blah, blah, blah. And so she's right. But there is good hope in the gospel. There's some good news. I know so many churches that live this whole TED Talk lifestyle speaking ideology. And when they do a hard sermon, they're like almost, he's apologizing. This is going to be a hard one, guys. I'm really sorry, but we got to talk about this. And really, And the fact that they have to do that once in a blue moon, and the fact that their numbers on those videos are probably lower speaks volumes, right? People don't want to be called out that they're not doing it right. They want to know that they're doing it right, and they want to feel good and walk away like being forgiven at the Catholic Church, where you're like, you say your thing and you do the rosaries and you're forgiven. It's bullshit, by the way. It's not how it works anymore. So Catholics, we'll talk about that another day, but I'm just saying, but most pastors, I would say, no, are definitely saved or doing it for the right reason. I say they might just be doing it wrong, but I think they've started with good intentions at minimum. But most pastors aren't in ministry for money. The big ones are, but the small ones don't really, there's no money in it, so it's not why they're doing it. So Samantha HW says this: I'm sorry, but you lost me when you started to promote missionaries. I think it's so devastating to try to convert every last person on earth to Christianity. It destroys cultures and honestly comes off a bit like white supremacy. Be honest. How would you feel if a bunch of brown people from foreign countries were going to every last small town in your country trying to bring Islam or their native religion with different gods and goddesses to try to convert your towns? Honestly, how would that make you feel? To have one town church torn down and have a mosque or Hayu temple there for you instead. So, how would it make me feel if missionaries came to my town and tried to convert? Well, she's got a point. My brother converted to Islam way back in the day, like 5 or 6 years ago, and as a Christian pastor, I was like, really? That's another conversation for another day, but I got pissed because he was trying to convert my mother to Islam, and my mother had recently given her life to Jesus at a Salvation Army church before she died, and I was pretty upset because if it's a fight, I mean, it's a fight for souls, right? I don't believe that, but at the time when I was still a pastor and I was still drinking the Kool-Aid, I thought that, mine is best. Look, the answer here is that I believe that if you believe in Jesus and he is who he says he is, you're good to go. You're fine. And that if you don't believe that stuff, that's another conversation that I'm still studying. Not sure you burn in hell for eternity. I'm not sure that's the answer either. Not sure if you just become worm food, you cease to exist, your consciousness stops. I don't know. But if I have a story, if the reason I believe what I believe, you guys like me for my commentary, right? You enjoy my take. I consider myself a well thought out, not necessarily most intelligent person always, but I definitely know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about something. I definitely believe what I believe, and sometimes it takes hard lessons to get there. And I used to be a fundamental Christian, and then I switched there. Now from where I came from to where I am now, you would never believe it, but I'm a person who's always learning. And so I do believe that I have some intelligence in my brain. So believe me when I tell you this, that I've studied them all, and I'm trying to figure out why Christianity is the one that is the most prominent in all the earth. Maybe next to, I don't know, Buddhism, I don't know. Or one of the biggest anyway. Maybe not the biggest, but it's one of the biggest. It streamlines into Catholicism and everything else. The one deity, Jesus, overall. That religion, okay? The one thing that always stops me in my tracks when I ask this question is, why do we think this is right? Why do Christians believe what they think is true and right? And this always comes back to this point, is that because our religion, faith, teachings, and I mean, even though the church doesn't follow this, is literally always about love. It always comes back to peace and love. Jesus taught to love, okay? Literally, the only commandment you really need to understand about the Bible, if you open the Bible and it was one word, it would be love, okay? If you were to boil the Bible down to one word. And so, the reason I believe what I believe is because we are taught that that's the proper way. The proper way is to turn the cheek when you get hit, okay? The proper way is to love your enemies, like, okay? The religion of Islam, and I'm not sure about the religion of Buddhism or what Indian cultures believe. It's maybe they believe some of the same stuff and it crosses over, but we're called to literally love no matter what. And so for me, that speaks volumes, because could that be wrong? No. If you're only called to do that, and you're not called to avenge and to burn and destroy and pillage, and like the Quran, everybody says the Quran is a peaceful book. There's lots in there of evidence against it. The Bible, you could say the same thing, all the war and God literally drowning most of the world, right? There's a lot of violence, there's a lot of like what could be construed as hate, but because we're called to that one thing, the reason Christians believe what they believe, if they believe it, is because we are called to love above all else. And every other religion that I've ever heard of, none of them stand on those same pillars. And so that's why, as a missionary, and friends of mine who are missionaries, they do this because they're called to bring the word out into the world. Now, what she's alluding to here is back in the day that nuns and missionaries would go out and literally convert people to like Western culture, not just religion, which was Christian. Western culture was tied into Christianity, and they did it wrong. She's right. The world today doesn't work that way, though. Missionary world is different. But if you have a story to tell that you believe will help somebody in the end, or advice to give that you know would be life-saving to somebody, that you absolutely truly believe that in your heart, would you not want to share it? Now, the argument could be made, yes, that the way they shared it back in the day was wrong. absolutely, and that they did these things. Missionaries did it wrong for so many years. It doesn't happen that way anymore, though. But if you, I think the basis of what she's saying is that, like, imagine going in and shifting cultures. But the issue here is that you don't have to shift anybody's culture. You can still have culture and believe in Jesus. What she's saying is that they believe in their deities and their cultures and their gods, and does mine trump that? And is it my responsibility to tell them that? Some would say yes. I don't know. I believe that if God puts that mandate on my heart, and I'm supposed to go do it, I'm going to go do it. It's not on my heart. So those who do it I find very selfless when they do it. They live very poorly. They have to beg for money. So regardless whether you believe or not that missionaries is a good thing or not, the point still stands that missionaries that I know anyway are doing it out of like the rock bottomless part of their soul, where they feel a calling to do it, and they live sometimes like paupers. They live sometimes like the lowest of the low, to get down in there and build relationships with people, even just to help them if they want to, in the name of Jesus, which is what tithing and giving is all about anyway. So you think about tithing, missionaries give the most. I'm not upset, so I guess it doesn't make me feel bad at all. If someone wants to decide to follow a religion that's not religion, or a faith that's not mine, I'm not going to be angry about that. You got to do you. What you're saying here, Samantha, is basically, how dare you go try to change someone's mind? So it's kind of presumptuous. She has some like points, right? She has some missionaries go in and they convert people, they change their language, all this other thing. But she says, she goes on to say, please stop feeling like you need to convert these people to correct or true religion. It's harmful beyond words. It definitely drives a huge wedge in our culture and between people that we're not there before. Even on a personal level, I can tell you how hurtful and devastating it is. So she's had a bad experience with missionaries. I'm not going to apologize for missionaries for the mission that they've been given. There's a calling on people's lives to go out and spread the gospel now. Whether or not they do that properly is another question. I don't know. I know that my friends and the people that are close to me do it out of the kindness of their heart. They do it, and they're not actually there converting people. The missionaries that I know are actually there just teaching other missionary kids. So they're literally just there to teach missionary kids. And kids from the neighborhoods come in, they teach them English if they want to. It's not like they're forcing it on people, but there are great benefits to being a missionary, even outside of the faith. People in these countries want to learn English. They want to learn Western culture. They don't want to always stay there, and that's okay too. And missionaries can fill a gap and a void and do those things for free in the name of Jesus. And that doesn't mean that if you don't believe in Jesus, they're not going to help you, because they absolutely will. You must have met the wrong missionaries, because we have two different takes on missionaries. But that's okay. Your point is valid, and it's partly right. And we're going to do an episode in the future called short-term missions, and how the danger and craziness that it is in the world. Long-term missions, I'm not sure. It depends what you're doing, I suppose. But we can talk about it all the time. But the missionaries I know teach other missionary kids, so it's not really... they're not out there converting, people in the forest and stuff like that and trying to change their language and change who they are. So, but I do get what you're saying. Anyway, so those are some questions that I've answered. A lot of great feedback. I'm happy. This is my jam. You guys know that. This is the stuff that I know the most of. I was culturally in it for 7+ years. Way before that, I grew up in this. So this is something I'm very interested in, and debunking myths that you guys have all been told or have just assumed that you believed for the years. And I was this person. I was a fundamental Christian when I was young. I grew up in a church like that. And I had to wake up. Somebody asked recently, what is post-Christian? Is this either you're Christian or not Christian? No, that's not true. Now, we're talking about the word Christian. Okay, now, post-Christian means that you are literally... for lack of a better term, you're above it. You've graduated from the church. You've graduated from religion. You've graduated from the world's view of Christianity, meaning you don't need to go to church on Sunday. You don't need to tithe into an offering plate. Post-Christian basically is, I think, what Jesus would be, is very much post-religion. It's after that. You've gone through it all. You've taken what you need from it to develop your faith, and you've moved on to something more real, like a personal relationship. Now, it does sound a little bit nefarious, but it's not. It just means that I'm kind of done with that old way of doing things. Traditions, laws, rules, being told what to do, exploring my own faith by myself, and just developing my faith outside of the influence of these people. And some people get there, some people don't. All this doesn't hinge on salvation or anything like that, or as far as I'm concerned. So all this is kind of semantics. If you believe in Jesus, it doesn't matter what you did, where you're going, what you've done, who you are, where you're going, what you're doing, what you're going to do. If you believe, you're good to go. David is a perfect example of that. Dave's a douche. And we're going to finalize that on Sunday. Last story, going to tie it all together. Neat little package for you. Thanks for watching this one, guys. This was an interesting one. I might go through these ones and find the hard questions for any topic that I do, and kind of do follow-ups for videos that I think are worth it. If you guys have questions about anything, join me Saturday night, 9-ish, 9:30-ish, where I light a fire, and I will sit down with you and answer all your questions. I used to do it, and the channel was growing for the lives. And then I started just only playing guitar and chilling, and people are like, I want to talk. So we're going to talk Saturday night for the first hour or so, and as it dwindles down, then I'm going to bust out the guitar and we're going to kind of vibe. So Saturday night is the night where you can come ask me anything you want. We can chat, we can laugh, we talk about cool things, we talk about food, we talk about where you're from. People like to vent there, like to look for support. It's a great place to come vibe out. So Saturday nights, come on out. And if you have any questions you want me to answer live, I might do a mailbag episode soon. Thanks for coming out and hanging out with me. I love you guys in the Tesla. I'm gonna get a better mic, I promise.